Welcome back to another fine episode of Mr. Rodder's Neighborhood. After yesterday's episode of our data dump on oil filter housings, we decided it was prudent to go ahead and modify the oil filter housing that we are going to be using on our super stock Buick project. Now, as I'd already said in the previous video, my favorite housing is the B housing, which is the one I'm actually going to start with here. The only difference between the B housing and the C housing is that it doesn't have the metric threads. So I plan on sticking with a standard Buick oil filter that, not necessarily is as available as everything else, but I don't know, it's just what I had on hand, and I felt it was probably the smart choice. The only thing I've done here is I've cleaned it up a bit in the blast cabinet with some aluminum oxide and glass bead, and then I washed it off and blow dried it with the compressed air. That's the only thing I've done so far compared to what you've seen just the other day. All right, so to get started, the first thing we need to know is how far we actually have to open up all of our passages. And the big thing that I normally like to do is I take one of the regular gaskets, and you made it up, since you've already completed the timing chain cover, it has the actual surface that you need. So you want to match those together. So since the timing cover's done, we've already got it painted up. It's gliptalled on the inside, and we will be installing a new front seal in it, which is just a regular off-the-shelf piece. You don't necessarily have to buy the stuff from TA Performance. You can just go buy a Felpro piece for a V6 Buick in this case. But to line up the holes and make your own gasket, because you're going to have to open up the gasket anyway. None of the passages that you're interested in are going to fit after modifying the timing cover. So what I found is the easiest way to do it is I have a couple of studs here that are 1/4 on one end, and then they're 1/4 inch, but they're fine thread, so it's probably like a 24, 26 thread. I don't necessarily use the fine thread, it's just I'm using this as a positioning device for my gasket. But what I like to do is I thread them into the timing cover, kind of opposite each other, and you don't want them too close to the areas that you're going to be trying to modify the gasket. Okay. Now you can sit down with an X-Acto knife and try to cut these things, but I found this is the quickest and easiest, most transferable way. You might still have to use a utility or X-Acto knife, but now you'll know exactly where you need to cut. Okay, so I've already completed this gasket here, and as you can see, the feed is already opened up. The feed to the block is opened up. The output from the pump is already opened up, and this is how much we took off. Now, to get this kind of exact cut, and you can't really see, it's just a small ring, right? But to get this kind of exact cut on this thing with an X-Acto knife, you would have to virtually be some kind of genius to figure out how to do it. But I'll show you the simplest, easiest way. All you need is a screwdriver, those two studs, and you can probably make them out of a 1/4 bolt, just cut the head off. And then you take one brand new gasket, and you slide it into place, lining up the holes, which I almost did not do. And it slides down into place fairly simply, okay? Well, now your two studs are holding it exactly where they need to be, all right? So this is your gasket, would essentially be lined up in the oil filter housing for if you were to assemble it. Now it's held into place. I also do this when I put the whole thing together, and then I put the other 4 screws in, taking the studs out last. But the next thing you need is a screwdriver. And I know this sounds weird. I don't really care what the end is. I'm more interested in the handle, okay? Because the handle actually has enough shape to make this happen, make it work easy, and you can knock this thing out in a matter of seconds. So all you really do is once you get it into place, you don't really have to do anything but just kind of hold it there. And then what you're going to do is the areas that you're needing to modify, you just tap the screwdriver around those areas, right? So we're going on the filter, or the pump output first. All right, so the handle itself, being plastic, is soft enough, it's not going to mar the aluminum, it's not going to damage anything, even if you don't necessarily hit it where you need to hit it. The other thing is the way that the end of the handle is shaped, it's easy to get into some of these compound curves. Okay, so we just completed, that's the oil output here from the pump to the oil filter housing. And if I can pull this off without damaging the gasket, I'll show you. All I did was go around it 2-3 times. And you can see that the gasket itself is torn. It's cut exactly to the shape of your filter. Okay, see that little piece hanging off there? Now it's going to be all the way around like that. You can actually just pick them and pull them right off. All right, but this was for demonstration purposes only. And you know, I'll if I'm going to use this gasket, I'll make sure that it's 100%. But we're going to go back and do this one. It's a circle, right? Much more complicated, you would think. Now, pretty simple. You hold it into place with your finger and then just tamp around it. All right, so there we go. I went around 3 times, and if you notice, the gasket's already opened up to the hole. The remaining piece of it is still down here in the pump, or in the output. So there's the little piece that you took out. But now it matches exactly to the size of the openings that you have already created in your timing cover. All right, so now we're gonna get down to brass tacks. Since we have a gasket now that exactly matches what our timing cover is, we're going to have to try to transfer that to the oil pump. All right. You also have to transfer it to a booster plate. If you're using a booster plate, which in my recommendation, you should use a booster plate. And then you're also going to have to transfer it, if you use a high volume pump, to the actual spacer for the high volume pump, because you're wanting all of your openings to be the exact same size as the ones in your housing. Otherwise, you are going to restrict oil flow. Now you can see here on the output from the pump, there's a considerable amount that we actually have to take out. And we'll do this in a couple of days steps, because I don't want to do another 45-minute video that puts everybody to sleep and then you don't watch the whole thing anyway. And then we'll also have to open up the oil feed coming back from the housing to your actual oil filter, or your timing cover that feeds the block. Okay, so we're gonna have to open it up probably about the same size as this gasket. All right, so to transfer it is really easy. You can use, like I made this one earlier, I can use the one that I just used now, it doesn't matter. It's just gonna have to be a sacrificial gasket. You might not even end up using it, or you'd probably just end up throwing it away when you're done. But now, since the opening is exactly the same size, you need to transfer that information to the oil filter housing. Okay, not as simple as it sounds. All right, I can see there's little pieces I need to tear off still. All right, so we'll move on to this gasket because I don't have hope to do this. All right, now as you can see, some of the, like this hole, the feed line from the filter housing to the timing cover it's considerably bigger lengthwise, but not as much so much on side size, right? It's showing a little bit on the edges here. We're also going to open the whole thing up, and then what I'll end up doing, this is just an idea of where the gasket's at for the timing cover. We'll go ahead and open the filter housing up probably a little more than the gasket is, and then we'll just do this same thing to the gasket again, transfer it to the timing cover, and then chamfer chamfer the opening here with just a chamfer bit, right? This one, for the feed coming from the timing cover to your oil filter housing, is going to have to be opened up quite a bit. So there's an easy way to do that. Okay, so to transfer your gasket information, all you need to do is take the gasket that you've already pre-made, lay it down on your housing here. All right, line up everything as best as possible. And then you take a Sharpie marker, right? And you draw around the edges of where you got to open it, okay? Once you do that, the Sharpie will permanently mark the openings that have to be enlarged. Okay, so there we go. There is our modified pattern transferred to the oil filter housing.